which I see going down as less human beings are at the IRS. That's the big picture item that I think we need to think through. How does that affect our clients? How does it affect our potential clients? And how does that affect the way we work within the system that we work in?
Hi, this is Christian Jones, and you're listening to the Pro Marketer Podcast. Whether you're in tax compliance, preparation, resolution, or accounting, whatever slice of the tax and accounting space you're in, the Pro Marketer Podcast is here to bring you tools, strategies to help you build your practice really well, to scale it really well. And we like to bring voices on who can really add value to really current, engaging topics right now. And so we've got a really fun one today that's about as top of brain as you could probably get related to our industry. We've got Andy Frye here. Andy, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Andy, this is, as I was telling you, probably our third or fourth time doing a podcast together. We've done webinars and live events, and I'll give your, background and CV a little bit here, but I'm always glad to talk with you, and you're a wealth of information. And if you haven't heard Andy talk before, I think you're going to be really glad you did. So hang tight through all this conversation, because I think you're going to get some really good perspective on a really interesting topic. But Andy is, really invested in the tax and accounting space from a number of vantage points, or a number of kind of positions. He also is the founder and CEO of the Pronto Tax School, and they've got 25,000 plus tax professionals that they're serving with tools, training, and support. A great guy all around, someone I always love talking with. So Andy, again, we're glad to have you. And today's topic is maybe the most interesting one you and I have talked about. All of them have been good, but this one to me at least feels kind of juicy. And so we're talking about staff reductions and other major changes at the IRS. And some of this is crystal ball, right? Because we probably fully don't know everything. But Andy, with your perspective and vantage point, I'm curious to get your take on some of this stuff. So question one is just regarding the layoffs at the IRS. What do you think about what's happening right now with the current layoffs, with other things that may be coming? What does it look like to serve taxpayers as a tax preparer specifically? What does it look like to serve clients in this space in the coming year, now that we're seeing kind of where the Trump administration is moving?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a total U-turn from the previous plan that was laid out in quite great detail from the IRS point of view. So if you look at, there was so much of the IRS is going to hire 87,000 new employees. They got this new $80 billion, all these new resources. And this has been, just going literally in the total opposite direction, where, we're seeing, previously sort of unthinkable headlines like, we may just get rid of the income tax system entirely, right? And this being said by not just by sort of think tanks, right, Christian, but by people in positions of quite high power. So I think the types of changes that are being discussed are extremely drastic. And then in terms of the actual there's not just an idea stage, but an actual implementation, right, of where, then this will be old news probably by the time this even gets out, because things are moving so quickly, right? But we have 7,000 immediately layoffs, 20,000 through the deferred resignation, where 20,000 will be leaving. IRS employees will be leaving by September, have already committed to leave. The total workforce right now at the beginning of the year of 2025 was 100,000. And then the plan, that's being like drafted, right, by the government, is to reduce the IRS workforce by 50%. So I kind of like have from being in the tax industry for over 20 years, I always like to think like there's plans, right? And then there's the reality of what happens. So I take some of that with like, well, will they replace the income tax system? Will it be totally eliminated? Probably not. Will they get to 50% staff reductions? I don't know, but probably, it may take longer than expected or may not happen, right? But either way, I think we're looking at a lot of reduced headcount. And so kind of like the big picture of what I see being, most worth consideration as a big picture item to start the conversation would be that for taxpayers and clients, Christian, that need more of a hand-holding experience. So, for example, they want to be able to call the IRS on the telephone, right? They
Yeah.
want to get a human being. So they want to do things like when I call customer service, sometimes I just yell into the phone like customer service, customer service, customer service, when instead of
Right.
going through those type of people, that it's going to be harder to interact with the IRS in that fashion, where you need a human being and you need a lot of hand holding. And so as the head count goes down, there's going to be less human beings available. So I see that being more into online self-service. If you think almost like self-checkout at the grocery store, so not as much checkers, right, but more online. You're checking yourself out. You're checking your own IRS records. And so for most taxpayers who use tax professionals, they don't desire those kinds of interactions, right? If they wanted to have interactions with computers, they might already be doing their own taxes. So for us as tax pros, it's like if taxpayers and clients are not able to interact and get direct service, like human being service from the IRS, that's which I see going down as less human beings are at the IRS. That's the big
Right.
picture item that I think we need to kind of think through. How does
Right.
that affect our clients? How does it affect our potential clients, right?
Right.
And how does that affect our overall the way we work within the system that we work in? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I am so tempted to like prognosticate on the bigger idea, which is replacing income tax with tariffs. And I think the math of that would, at a minimum, suggest maybe not the best trade with the way that's all going presently. And again, stuff changes rapidly, and we're not a political commentating podcast, but it does feel like, yeah, what type of world do we live in if the IRS is gone and personal income tax is gone? And the goalpost does get moved a lot with what they're saying they're going to do. At one point, it's no income tax, and recently I've seen, as of the recording of this podcast, it's people under 200K.
Yep.
I've seen that. So there's a lot of stuff flying around, but what I'm hearing you say is obviously um, there's going to be some opportunities to shepherd people through some chaos, which in recent memory, this industry has a lot of experience with, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we can't crystal ball it to the point of knowing exactly how this is going to shake out. And you want to, both use your eyes and kind of, is that likely? I don't know. Maybe they would do. It doesn't seem like that would happen, but if it does, and even just with the drawdown of employees, whether it's people that are on deferred resignations, people that have been let go, and obviously they were scaling up and then they stopped all those plans. Um, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but what are some of the risks that if you're a tax professional, you should start to prep for as we approach the extension deadline, as we approach the end of the year? I mean, it'll be here before we know it, but what things would you do to try and prepare for what at least at a minimum will be a greatly reduced IRS?
Yeah, and I think that the initial reductions of staff, like for example, they're saying 18,000 more in a staff reduction starting in May. So it's going to be, I think, happening both quickly, but also I think the drastic things if and when they happen are I think going to take a little bit longer. But again, that's just sort of my feel for it, based on what I've seen in the industry over the years.
Yeah.
So I think that there's more extensions being filed and more sort of complicated clients on extension. I think it's more in vogue to file extensions. So we hear
Yeah.
from our members, for example, Christian, that that they have more people on extension than ever, and more kind of tricky clients than ever. More people that have multiple businesses, for example, people that have multiple properties, right? So if we think
Right.
back and pull back to that first big picture point of if your client needs something from the IRS. So let's take like a common example, like a transcript, right? Like I need to get a transcript of a past year because I I skipped filing one year because I was getting divorced or something, I had
Yeah.
something going on that I was sick, right? So that if you have the kinds of clients that they don't want to try to self-checkout that process, right? They don't want to go to the self-checkout counter. They want to have either a human being at the IRS directly help them. They want to be able to call somebody and directly help them, or they want you to directly help them to get that transcript or to get whatever they need from the IRS. Those
Right.
opportunities to get that kind of more hand-holding, concierge service or whatever you want to say, obviously, if you have 100,000 employees and you're losing between 20 and 50% of your workforce, that's not really going to help your morale too much, right? You got to keep in mind that a lot of the people at the IRS that are departing, like for example, through the deferred resignation program, are the more senior people, that were close to retirement and have a lot of knowledge about how to work with all their different computer systems, like the total complication of the tax code that's occurred, right? These are the people that when you got on the phone with them, they go ask their manager. These are the managers, so as a
Right.
tax pro, if you're sitting there thinking like through extension season and then heading into next year, my clients in general do not want to have a self-checkout experience if they have an issue. So that puts more onto me to have to know how to deal with the IRS in the event that we need to have some interaction with the IRS beyond just the tax filing process.
Yeah.
So how do we go about that? How do we be efficient with that? How do we communicate to clients what's included or not included with a tax prep service as far as corresponding with the IRS if needed? Right.
Right.
So those are kind of some of the things that are kind of on our mind, and as well as those of the tax pros that we talk to.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that all is a really safe forecast, even if some of the more cataclysmic changes don't happen. And you would know more than me, Andy, but what I'm seeing is that even to go back to what the prior Biden administration had done with staffing up, I was hearing from different people that the IRS was getting more and more, what's the right word? Things were getting smoothed out. Maybe not all
Yeah.
the time, but it felt like it was getting better anecdotally. Now, maybe some people listening to this are like, heck no, it was still hard. Or maybe it's like, no, it's amazing. It's always been great. But it does seem like it was getting better. And at a minimum, if you drop 20 to 50%, and especially your kind of senior folk, just play that math out and you're going to have to hold people's hands more, as you're saying. And there's opportunity there, right? There's opportunity. It's a problem. It's going to be a mess, potentially. I hope not, but it's probably going to be a mess. What are the opportunities for someone that's serving people with tax preparation as a service? What can they kind of get a positive spin on what's happening now as it relates to their firm, their clients, and their work as we approach the next year?
Yeah, I think that it's part of a trend that has already been happening where if, so imagine I'm a client, I need my taxes done. I also want to make sure that when my taxes are done, if something goes wrong, I have some protection, I have some backup, and I know a trust factor with my service provider. So I think that this is only going to accelerate that dynamic, right? And you're going to have people be, from the client side choosing, more based on the reality of what we see as service providers, right? Is that the value that I provide to someone by preparing their tax return doesn't end when that tax return is submitted, accepted, and they get their refund. It extends out into the statute of limitations of if they have a problem later. It extends out into if they receive an income not matching letter from the IRS, that
Yeah.
we're going to go and respond to that, and that's included in the
Mhm.
service that we provide, right? It includes where if you, God forbid, get audited, how is that handled and who is that handled by? Do you have a person that's going to handle that, like a local person that you can go into their office, speak to them, you know their other team members, you have a personal relationship with them, or are you dealing with a giant corporation that they're going to put you through a process and it's going
Right.
to be a different person, than you were dealing with before. And so I think from the client side is that those things are just going to accelerate because they're going to think, similar to what happened to COVID, right? Where we had picked up a lot of clients by the reality of people saying, I need help from the IRS. I need them to respond to me, and I'm not able to get through, and I can't get a response, right? So my next thing is to look for a professional and say, can you get a response, right? Can you resolve this? And so I think that's just going to happen more and more and more. We already had sort of a dry run, I would say, through COVID, as well
Right.
as the IRS did. I think like I'm not one of the sort of cheerleaders for the IRS, like, like it's so great, but I also think like they've done a pretty amazing job as far as like all the change that they've had to manage.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I think they've added in, some pretty effective technology, solutions, right? I think the online portals, for example, that they're setting up. So they have a taxpayer portal where
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
log in similar to like an online banking or
Right.
again, a self-service type of option as a taxpayer. And you can see, for example, what did my estimated tax payments were last year, right? Or do I have any overdue balances, that kind of thing. And then on the professional side, they have a Tax Pro portal, and they're continuing to add features to these portals where if you're somebody that's open to self-servicing, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have more ability to do that more easily. And so if you think out as a tax pro is like, say you have somebody that approaches you, I can't get a hold of the IRS by phone. And
Right.
that's what they want to do is get a hold of the IRS by phone because that's what they think is the most efficient way to solve their issue. If you know as a tax pro, I can more efficiently resolve that through the online account, right? And I can get you the result that you want, dear client, more efficiently without needing to call, without needing to sit on hold. I can just get logged into the account and take care of it. That person's going to be
Right.
willing to pay for that because that's
Yeah.
where the value is, right? And they kind
Yeah.
of don't really care that much how the sausage gets made. So I think the
Right.
more that people come to us with, I'm having
Yeah.
this issue, I can't get a hold of the IRS, or even the person that I'm dealing with at the IRS was new and I didn't feel like they knew what was going on or they couldn't help me, right? If you can
Right.
step into that and say, kind of have your sort of your secret sauce, I guess you could say, of like, well, I'm up on how the new systems work. I'm able to resolve this, more efficiently, even if it's doing something sort of old school, like calling the practitioner hotline. Just that problem solving ability. I think that picking up those clients when it's not the regular tax season, Christian, if your
Yeah.
office and you personally are available as a service provider, you're just going to pick up more clients because once they have one experience like that, they view the entire tax services industry differently. And they think, I want a human being who can not only prep my taxes, accurately, successfully, et cetera, but I want somebody to be able to stand behind me who's a problem solver. And if I don't want to deal with the IRS, I have somebody who can and wants to help me out and has the expertise to do that efficiently.
Yeah. And this, I have a lot of people we work with or that I bump into that would fit this bill.
Absolutely.
Um, it's kind of in the vein, although it's slightly tangential. And when I hear this suite of services, it sometimes means something different to everyone. But this is evolving kind of the tax prep service into an advisory service, right? And it seems like at one point, we always hear over the years, you're going to do your taxes on a postcard. It's going to be easier. It's going to be easier. And I agree. I think some of the tech that's been put forward has made some of it easier. But if you reduce the workforce and create these types of points of friction, that's normally been, a process for your clients, just getting documents and going through the works, all the things you've got to do to get their taxes completed. Now there's more friction. That hand holding, that concierge service, that kind of like, I'm your advisor, I'm your trusted, kind of go-to source, not just to get things filed on time, but to, work through these speed bumps if there's going to be more speed bumps along the road. I think that's going to be the reality just to get it done. But like you're saying, the positioning of that
Yep.
is an opportunity.
Yep.
And not everyone positions themselves as something beyond, just let's call it a tax preparation service provider, right? Like if you're just saying I'm a tax preparer and I'll get it done on your site, in your emails, in your meetings with prospective clients and existing clients, I think this is a messaging thing
Yep.
that you can early in the year get ahead of. And just also realize that you're probably going to be spending more time per client. And that also has to be factored in. And it's a lot better to talk about stuff that happens and like increased costs, just if your, kind of COGS per client are going up in terms of time, if we want to think about it that way, like getting ahead of, hey, this is what we're probably gonna be dealing with, and let's be on it, and here's what we're gonna do. Your clients are gonna love you. They're also gonna get it when there's points of friction, and you're also gonna be like the expert. And if you onboard new clients in that way and you retain existing clients with that mentality, if you're already vibing in that direction, then great, you're well positioned for this. But for those that aren't, this is the time to kind of get a hold of internal messaging to your existing clients and new leads. This is a great topic to bring up early in the year before people are panicking. What do you think about that, Andy? Is that right? Is there anything else you'd add to that?
I think that's it. And I think from us being your customer on the on our tax business marketing side for numerous years,
Yeah.
I think that's part of what I meant by I see this as a continuation and acceleration of the trend that's already been going on, because like your people and people that use your services and follow your kind of the culture that you guys have built and contributed to within the tax industry, these are service providers that they are that port in the storm for their clients. Like they are that provider that is in many cases, Christian, is the only trusted person in that person's financial life. I mean, that's what I like to think about sometimes, is that as complex as our lives have become in a financial sense in this country and frankly in this world, many people, like a large segment of the American population, do not have any trusted financial professional other than their tax person, their tax man or their tax lady, their tax person. So I think that relationship, which you guys, definitely do a great job of helping to build through your services, but also not just through your services, but through your things like this, like the podcast, like making these topics important and focusing on the value of relationships. I just think that's going to continue to grow, because I think that there already has been, and there's going to continue to be that if I want to use a person and I want to have a person who is a contact, I need to look at going with a more independent tax professional, a more independent business, a smaller business. And we are in one of the only businesses, Christian, where being a smaller business is actually a kind of an advantage in a lot of ways, because a lot of the client side, they love to just work with one or two people and a person. And, as long as you're doing a really good job, it's not that they don't want to work with you if you do grow your business bigger, but they also love to just work with a personal business that has personal service. And you can't say that a lot of other businesses, the bigger businesses have a huge advantage. For us, because of the smaller businesses, of our ability to build those relationships in the community, get to know people's families, all that kind of stuff. All of this just plays into that, because when you start talking to your clients, like for example, I noticed a couple of your guys' recent emails are about this exact topic, right? And you say to your clients, they're planning to cut the IRS staff by 50%. And that's a fact, and whether that will manifest or not, we don't know, but those are the plans that are being, that's what they're looking to do, right? Actively, right? And drafting plans to do that. And you mentioned in the event you need to contact the IRS, if they have 50% less staff, everybody knows, like, you don't have to be that good at math to know that there's probably going to be harder to get a hold of a person at the IRS that's going to help you. So with that in mind, just keep in mind that this isn't something you need to worry about, because we are your person. We are your people, right? To be able to protect you from that. And if this is something, for example, that you might have friends and family that are concerned about this, right? And how this might affect them, please forward this email to them, or please mention to them that, hey, the IRS is looking to cut staff by 50%. The way that we handle our clients is that we are not just your kind of form filler of your tax return, but we're your, in a sense, you kind of like their bodyguard with the IRS, right? You kind of like their buffer between an organization that, let's face it, the average person wants absolutely nothing to do with, right? Their worst nightmare in many cases is to have an elongated interaction with the Internal Revenue Service, right?
Right.
Or not be able to resolve a problem and have to go through all these prompts and all these chat bots and all this kind of stuff. People don't want anything to do with that. So if we talk to people about this and say, we're able to handle these kinds of things, take care of them for you. And I think, something that is as we're broadcasting that, and it might even be worth discussing with clients and getting feedback, right? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this is how do you communicate what's included in a tax prep service, right? So there's more and more of as the full scale audits have gone down, and which I think that will continue to happen because again, that requires, as of now, a human being, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there will be, but they're saying because they're trying to not have even bigger deficits, right? So politically, they're trying to not have the tax collections go way down. So that means if you have less full-scale audits, but you still want to keep tax collections strong or going up, you need to do more automated collection. So
Right.
that's like the automated letters that they've already been going up, and those are ways that they have great ROI. You don't have much cost. It's an automated letter. You ask the person to submit. AI is going to be able to even review a lot of the documents, make different adjustments and all that. So the technology is going to be there. But for when you're providing a tax preparation service, how do you communicate if that happens? If I get a letter, is that included? Or is that more of on the TurboTax model of there's like an audit protection plan, or there's an extra charge that I can opt into, right? So I think from a business point of view, I actually don't think that our costs necessarily have to go up from this. I think we actually can get some efficiencies from technology and from, frankly, knowledge of how to do things faster. But
Right.
I think it's a communication challenge and a pricing challenge in the sense of, do you offer something additional that, like, if they get those letters, right, you're able to resolve it without charging them? Because nobody really likes the whole nickel and diming thing, or I thought this was included. So I think clarifying that piece of it, right, of like, you're taking care of somebody's taxes. Imagine they get a letter in the summer, right? Are you going to resolve that at no cost? Are you going to not be around and it's not included? Right? Or are you
Right.
going to refer it to somebody who's more of a tax problem resolution specialist? So if you imagine with every client that you sit down with, them getting a letter and what their expectations are relative to you resolving that as far as paying you, you could either
Yeah.
put that into your price and say this would be included up to such and such. You could say, keep in mind that if this does happen, I'm going to
Yeah.
charge you more. But how do you do that in a way that works for your business and for your clients? And I think that's something that, like, as you head even into the extension deadline, like, people can gain additional revenue as well as additional
Right.
matching expectations from the clients, because a lot of the disappointment or unpleasantness of this business, right, comes from unmatched expectations. Oh, I thought you would have taken care of this for free for me because I paid you $500 to do my taxes, which I thought was
Exactly.
outrageous.
Right.
I
No, I
thought
think
these
that's a
were
great
included,
question. Yeah,
right?
that's something that I would say, as you're talking about technology and systems and leveraging things that are there now, having a really robust, let's say, sales or onboarding system that, maybe isn't completely automated where you're completely divorced from engaging with it. But from my perspective, not everyone does this, but we do have a lot of people that do offer an audit protection add-on or, kind of service writer to tax preparation where it's an extra X. And again, with some details of what that includes, and we'll deal with the IRS for you. And if you don't, then hey, you can come back to us, but there will be different fees. I think that is something that a lot of people have used to great effect and will, help them build that into their sites, into their ecosystem. But I'd also say, as a part of your kind of intake or, existing client or new client, your onboarding, if you want to call it that, or just your yearly process of getting documents and collecting information from people, that system, new and existing clients, having this type of language about all the things we're discussing in some way that's like in layman's terms and clarifies it, and also like, yeah, properly presents the expectations.
Yep.
with clear pricing. It doesn't have to be rocket science. What happens if you do get audited? What happens if X, Y, and Z happen? What happens if you get one of these letters? And just give people the chance to say, hey, I want to be covered by it or I don't. And give them that expectation. Because again, yes, how many times do well-meaning tax pros just not take the time to, kind of give this clarification and therefore possibly alienate themselves from clients that they really are positioned to serve, but they just didn't know. Oh, that wasn't included. I didn't know I was opting in or out of something. Again, just by doing tax preparation with you, I didn't realize this wasn't a part of it. So that education piece, having some education piece, and then again, like as you get into your discovery calls with new leads, or if you're upselling a client, or if you're working with an existing client, just building a system, forms, surveys, and automation so that you're kind of doing that internal work. That's all stuff that we can do. It's all stuff that you can build software to do. Like there's lots of options for that, but whatever system you use, it's the system, even if it's simple, um, something that's better than, again, hoping you mention it in calls or sending out one email. I think it's just the education piece of no, 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 client, this is a thing. Let's think about this and let me kind of do some planning on my end so that by the time you're hearing from me, I'm guiding you through this process. And yes, there is increased revenue. That's a plus. But it's also, again, as you're describing, sometimes it's going to happen anyways, right? So would you rather have the complication of trying to set expectations after the fact or do it ahead of time and leverage
Yep.
technology ahead of
And I
time?
think this is something that we did a few years ago because we saw that while they kept broadcasting, hey, audits are down, it's fewer people, the letters were up, right? And it wasn't just from the federal, but it's also from the state, from the local. The idea of, if you think of it logically, right, is let's say I'm a tax collector. Okay, once I assign like a revenue agent to your case, the cost is going to go way up, right?
Right.
Versus if I just have a running computer programs and saying, it's likely that these deductions are inflated, right? Or this
Yeah.
income doesn't match, right? And I just send you a letter, an automatically generated and even automatically mailed letter saying, we looked at your tax return. This income was missing. Here's your additional tax. Here's your assessment. It just makes sense, right, that that's going to go up because the ROI on that, the cost is extremely low. The ROI is high. And if you look at what's going on with AI, Christian, like you and I know, because I know you follow a lot of this stuff. Is like, let's envision for a second what happens in an audit, right? The tax return is flagged for audit. Okay, so that's one that can be done by computers and AI even better and better, right? To select which ones are going to give you the most possibility, right? Then there's correspondence that goes out requesting such and such documents, right? That can be done by computers, AI, better and better. There's some kind of submission of documents and proof or response, right, from the taxpayer that now can be reviewed by AI, including like looking at receipts, looking at, right? So, and then there's a change or no change process that could be done by AI, particularly like that could be done right now by a programmer that builds a program to do those kinds of things, right? Then there's an assessment, then there's maybe an appeal from the taxpayer. Oh, that more correspondence comes back. Oh, the AI could also respond to that, et cetera, right? So and then the final assessment, collecting the signature, et cetera. All of this can be done by computers. So when you have the new IRS commissioner, which is the theme, seems like it's like the fifth one in the past 3 months, but saying, don't you think that all these layoffs and cutting the IRS staff by 50% is going to reduce the amount of taxes collected? And he says, no. If you think about it, if you just do it more automatically, right, you probably can still collect quite a lot of tax. But for the end user, the recipient of that letter, that whole process is an absolute nightmare. They don't want anything to do with that, right? So if you are dealing with that yourself efficiently, effectively, but when you sit down with every client now, I think you need to think, what is the risk that a letter is going to come? And how am I business wise pricing this? So for example, Christian, we didn't want, because our business a lot of is based on efficiency And we didn't want to engage in a conversation with every client. We tried it actually one year of, do you want an audit protection plan? Because like
Yeah.
just mentioning audit, they were like, well, I thought I'm here as an audit
Yeah.
protection plan. Like, right? Like, why are you
Right.
mentioning audit? Like, this is making, and it's just like gumming up
Yep.
the works, right? Like, it was making it harder to get the stuff out. So we just started saying, letter response is included as part of your service. So imagine you get a letter, God forbid, I mean, we have the return done to the best of our abilities. I don't anticipate this is going to be a problem, but letters have been going up. So people get letters now more than they've ever gotten them. Half the time they're not even right, whatever, but either way, they need to be responded to. So
Right.
when we do this service for you, just realize that our offices are open year round and available year round. And God forbid you were to be to get a letter, your service that you're paying for today includes letter response, right?
There you go.
But it doesn't include if you get a full scale audit, right? Or if you have to go through some kind of automated process like that. So I think you need to be strategic about
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
want, how does your business and your clientele handle this? And like for us, we were able to get over the idea of people saying, well,
Mhm.
that's more than last year. It's more than you charged last year. Yeah, I'm not sure if you saw in the news, but these letters are going out right and left. So we've adjusted our business practice so that we know that if you get that letter, you're not in that category of people that's like stressing out, running around, trying to like find people and all that. You're where it's already handled and just it's going to be done at no charge. And so most people say, yeah, that's it's actually pretty smart on your part, and I'll pay the extra $40 or the extra $50, right? And it just eliminates a lot of the conversations and even operationally, Christian, a lot of the, well, now if somebody gets a letter, we have to check and like, did they pay for the audit protection or whatever? It's just like, this is a part of our service. This is the way that we handle it. And we communicated this with you as a client. So that for us has worked well, but I know for other
Yep.
tax pros, they've, addressed it in different ways. However you do it, I think you just really, there's a great opportunity to do it. And I think it's a pretty urgent need as well.
Yeah. There's a lot you just hit on, Andy, that I'm like, that's really insightful and really good advice. And the thing that, I think you and I, let's do a follow-up on is just what we're seeing, even with mentioning the new kind of director stepping in. That's obviously, hint, hint, it's more of the same. It's leveraging technology and especially AI at the IRS in new ways. I think that's, again, it's happening. And so as we're thinking, layoffs, right? Less maybe touch points. It actually might be the opposite, as you're saying. Like letters are going up, and that might continue as this new regime tries to make up ground from what had been human touch points, with some choke points there of how much they can process to now just maybe a lot of incorrect letters, but using AI and using tools to kind of fire that out. By the end of this year, we could, who knows, a little bit of speculation, but we could be dealing with an even increased environment with more volume of those letters. And that's, again, speculative. It's already going up, as you're saying. It's already a thing. But as you look at this workforce reduction, I think some of the news, which is, again, just mainstream news, is like people aren't filing now thinking the IRS won't catch them. And it's like, it's probably not going to be a thing. As long as IRS remains, I think that they're going to find a way to send those letters out and catch those things. You would assume, right? We don't know for sure, but I think that when you have a tech forward director and a tech forward administration, a tech forward, efficiency minded group of people, it's already been going that way. But this is just something that, like you were saying, you've got to talk about. Whatever happens, it is very safe to make a plan to talk about this. Talk about letters, talk about audit, talk about
Yeah.
changes, and adapt your pricing. Doesn't have to completely wholesale change, but I like the way you handled it. I mentioned the way that other people handled it. And, I'm so tempted to riff on AI in other directions now. But let's save that for another day. Let's save that for another day. I've really enjoyed this, Andy. Is there anything you didn't get to mention that you want to add in as we turn to close?
Yeah, I just think I love your focus on the opportunity piece of it. I mean, you and I, when we were kind of brainstorming, even before we jumped on live, is
Right.
environments of change, and even that include a certain amount of fear or even panic, are, I hate to say it's the water that we're used to swimming in, but
Right.
it, it's it's quite a rich and fertile soil for us as tax professionals, because a lot of what we do is around reducing our clients' stress, making sure that they don't get into problems, making sure that they don't spend so much time on these extremely negative things in life, such as dealing with the IRS, right? That's like got to be like very top of the list of like, I want to
Might
hang
be
out with
the
my
top.
kids. I want to like do, I don't want to do that, right? So
Yeah.
this is already what we are doing. And this, if we look at it the right way, it is an opportunity. Like it's an opportunity. And I think it's just looking at it, how is it an opportunity for you? If you can put yourself in your clients, and also I think it's important to say your potential clients, because there's a lot of clients out there. There's a lot of people out there that are going to be moving towards using a tax professional because of this change, right?
Right.
Because these things, tax stuff is more in the news than it's ever been, So like, it's just like with
Yes.
COVID, where a lot of people started using a tax pro during COVID because they're like, there's way too many changes going on. This is like, I don't care what kind of AI or software you got. I need like, this guy's been doing
Right.
taxes for 20 years. He knows what's going on. I'm gonna trust him. And think about those relationships that were formed, right, during that time. So this is a time of great opportunity. And I think just even being involved in a discussion and thinking, putting yourself in your client's shoes and your potential client's shoes to say, if I have clients, Christian, that if and when they ever would deal with the IRS, they need handholding.
Yep.
Okay, so they want to try to call somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that's gone, that because that was gone for a while, right? During COVID, or when there was like a million people every second calling the IRS about every conceivable thing, right? And they were I think it was like some ridiculous number. It was like 18% of calls were even answered, right? So like,
Wow.
if you get back to that type of environment, right? And
Right.
it's just, if you have any segment of your clients or potential clients that they hate every part of that, they don't want to use chat bots. They don't want
Yeah.
to go onto online portals. They don't, all of that sounds absolutely horrible. Any
Yeah.
messaging that you say that that's going on and we are the solution to that, we are the way that you don't have to be concerned about that, is a
Right.
winner for you, right? And so a lot of us are already doing these kinds of things. But one of my favorite quotes, in business, Christian, is, and I think this may be a paraphrase, I don't know if it's an exact quote, but from
Yeah.
Larry
Yeah.
Bird, the basketball player, is that
Mm-hmm.
um, if the guy didn't catch it, it's not a good pass.
Right.
So I could throw the ball behind my back and be the greatest pass in the world, but if it hits the guy in the
Right.
face and goes out of bounds, it's not a good pass. So
Yeah.
if we are sitting here knowing that as tax professionals, oh yeah, I got my clients back for sure. Like, I'm ready
Yeah.
for this IRS staff reduction, et cetera. But we have to engage with service providers like you. We have to be out on social. We have to be in
Right.
our community, having conversations, real conversations with people, and make it clear that we are prepared for this. We are thinking about
Yep.
this. We're thinking about this so that you don't have to think about this. And if and when you have any issue with this, like, don't even worry. We
Yeah.
got this dialed in, right? And so they need to not, we need to not only know that, right? But clients and potential clients need to know that. And if you can do that, I mean, I just think the sky's the limit as far as the relationship aspect, the relationship value that you can build up.
Well said, Andy. That's all gold. Um, let's talk about a follow-up on some of this stuff in the coming months and get you back here and do a recap of what's happening, an update. This is a great, post-tax season, kind of primer as people think about the next season. Some really core things to think about, both related to the IRS, related to messaging, related to pricing, how you serve your clients, and just adapting. We're in an industry that needs the professionals who are a part of it to adapt a lot, especially post COVID. It's been nothing but evolving at a pretty rapid rate. And so I kind of hate that's not changing, but also it's where we've been. And if you're here still serving clients in this space, then you're probably, even if you don't love it, you're more comfortable with it. So we'll keep bringing people like Andy on. We'll bring Andy back. Andy, thank you again for your time. And I'll let you get out of here, and we'll do a follow-up here in a little bit.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And appreciate everybody who watched and or listened. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Christian.
Yep. Thanks, guys. See ya.